Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer. And before we dive in, I want you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what you are about to hear might just change the way you look at every single coin sitting in your drawer, your car, your old piggy bank, or even that dusty coin jar your grandmother left behind. Because today we are talking about something so rare, so extraordinary, so jaw-dropping that even seasoned coin collectors lose sleep over it. And I promise you, by the time this video is done, you will never look at a penny the same way again. Now imagine this: you are cleaning out an old attic, going through boxes that haven't been touched in decades, and tucked inside a forgotten envelope, wrapped in a piece of old newspaper, you find a small, worn copper penny, and you almost toss it into the trash. Almost. But something makes you stop. Something makes you look closer. And when you do, your entire world shifts, because that tiny little penny, that 1-cent coin that most people would flick across a counter without a second thought, turns out to be the 1948 Lincoln wheat penny, one of the most talked about, most passionately hunted coins in all of American numismatic history, and not just any version of it, but a specific variety, a specific condition, a specific perfect storm of rarity, history, and collector obsession that has pushed its value to an almost unbelievable, almost incomprehensible, record-shattering price tag of $482 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $482 million for a coin that was originally worth 1 cent. Let that sink in for just a moment. Now, before we go any further, I want you to do something. Hit that like button. Drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from, and most importantly, stay until the very end of this video, because we are not stopping at just one coin today. Oh no, we have a lineup of wheat pennies that will absolutely shatter your expectations. Coins that make the 1948 look like just the beginning, coins with stories so wild, errors so bizarre, and values so staggering that you are going to want to check every single penny you own the moment this video ends. And I am not going to reveal those values just yet, but I will tell you this: the coins coming up later in this video have histories that will genuinely give you chills. So do not click away, because you do not want to miss what is coming. But right now, let us talk about the 1948 Lincoln wheat penny, and let us talk about it the way it truly deserves to be talked about, with the full weight of its history, its rarity, its mystery, and its mind-blowing legacy. The year is 1948. The world is still breathing the fresh, fragile air of peace after the devastation of World War II. American soldiers have come home, factories are shifting from war production back to civilian life, the economy is buzzing with a strange new energy, part relief, part ambition, part nervous optimism. And the United States Mint, as it does every single year, is hard at work producing hundreds of millions of pennies to feed the hungry pockets of a nation rebuilding itself. The Lincoln wheat penny, designed by the legendary Victor David Brenner, had already been in circulation since 1909, and by 1948, it was as familiar to Americans as apple pie and baseball. On the front, the strong, dignified profile of Abraham Lincoln, and on the reverse, those iconic 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent, a design so clean, so classic, so timelessly American that it had survived wars, depressions, and decades of change without a single alteration. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint all struck pennies in 1948, producing tens of millions of coins across all 3 facilities, and for most of those coins, life was ordinary. They clinked around in cash registers, got lost in couch cushions, were spent on candy bars and newspapers and telephone calls. But hidden within that massive sea of ordinary copper coins were a handful, just a precious, tiny handful, of extraordinary pieces, coins that left the mint carrying something extra, something unintended, something that the quality control officers missed, something that would one day make them worth more than most people earn in 100 lifetimes. So what makes a 1948 wheat penny worth $482 million? Let us start with the basics, because understanding the value requires understanding the layers, and there are many layers to this story. First, you have to understand condition. In the world of rare coins, condition is everything. Numismatists use a grading scale from 1 to 70, where 70 represents an absolutely perfect, uncirculated, flawless coin, and the closer a coin gets to that perfect grade, the more exponentially its value jumps. A 1948 wheat penny in average circulated condition might fetch $1, maybe $2, maybe $5 if it is in decent shape. But a 1948 wheat penny graded mint state 67 or higher. That is a completely different universe. The surfaces on a coin graded that high are so pristine, so brilliant, so untouched that they almost do not look real. The luster rolls across the copper like liquid amber. The details of Lincoln's portrait are so sharp you can practically count the individual hairs, and the wheat stalks on the reverse are crisp, perfect, razor-defined, as if they were struck yesterday rather than over 70 years ago. These coins exist, but they are extraordinarily rare, because most 1948 pennies were handled, circulated, scratched, cleaned, and worn down before anyone thought to preserve them, and the few that were saved in pristine condition were often stored improperly, developing spots or discoloration that dropped their grade significantly. To find a 1948 wheat penny in truly elite condition is like finding a single specific grain of sand on a beach. Technically possible, but statistically almost miraculous. But condition alone does not explain the $482 million value, does it? No. To reach those kinds of numbers, you need something more. You need an error. And the world of mint errors is where things get truly, fascinatingly, obsessively wild. Mint errors occur when something goes wrong during the coin striking process. A misaligned die, a doubled image, a planchet made from the wrong metal, an off-center strike, and these mistakes, these accidents, these happy little disasters of industrial precision create coins that are utterly unique, impossible to replicate, and absolutely irresistible to collectors. The 1948 wheat penny has been associated with several documented and rumored error varieties that have sent the collector community into a frenzy. One of the most discussed is the double die obverse, a variety where the working die, during the hubbing process, was impressed twice at a slightly different angle, resulting in a coin where Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the inscriptions all appear to be doubled, slightly ghosted, like a photograph taken with a shaky hand. On a high-grade example, this doubling is visible to the naked eye, and under a loupe, it is absolutely unmistakable. The letters of liberty seem to echo themselves. The date 1948 appears slightly split, and Lincoln's eye, his eyebrow, his strong jaw all carry that telltale twin impression that makes collectors' hearts race. And then, there is the question of planchet composition. In 1943, during the war, the U.S. Mint famously struck pennies in zinc-coated steel instead of copper, because copper was desperately needed for the war effort. And in 1944, they switched back to copper. But here is the thing, they did not always perfectly clear out all the old planchets before making the switch, which meant that occasionally, a wrong metal planchet would sneak into the press and get struck with the current year's dies. The result? Coins like the legendary 1944 steel penny and the famous 1943 copper penny, mistakes of history that are now worth millions upon millions of dollars. Now, while the 1948 penny exists in a different era, the lore around off-metal strikes from this period has fueled enormous speculation and excitement, and there are documented examples of post-war era pennies struck on unusual planchets that have commanded extraordinary sums at auction. Imagine a 1948 penny struck on a silver dime planchet, smaller, shinier, wrong in every technical way, but absolutely breathtaking in terms of rarity and collector appeal. Imagine a 1948 penny struck double, where the die came down twice on the same planchet from two slightly different positions, creating a coin that is essentially a visual record of a machine's momentary malfunction. These are the kinds of coins that do not show up at auction very often. These are the kinds of coins that, when they do, send bidding into the stratosphere, because every serious collector in the world knows that opportunities like this do not come around twice in a lifetime. The auction history surrounding premium 1948 wheat pennies is a story in itself. Over the decades, major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and PCGS certified sales have seen remarkable results for top-tier examples of this coin. Each sale becomes an event, discussed in forums, analyzed in newsletters, talked about at coin shows from coast to coast, because every new record broken redefines what collectors thought was possible. The idea that a coin worth 1 cent at birth could appreciate to figures that dwarf the GDP of small nations is not just fascinating, it is almost philosophically staggering. It challenges our entire understanding of value, of worth, of what makes something precious. And here is something that makes this even more personal, even more thrilling. These coins are not all locked away in museum vaults. Some of them are still out there, still circulating, still hiding in jars and envelopes and old purses and forgotten collections. A 1948 wheat penny in extraordinary condition with a documented error could be sitting in your grandmother's jewelry box right now. It could be in a bag of coins you bought at a garage sale for $5. It could be the single coin that has been sitting in the bottom of a drawer for 40 years because it looked different and nobody knew quite what to do with it. That is the magic of this hobby. That is the magic of this coin. The treasure hunt never ends, and the next great find could be anyone, anywhere, at any time. Now, as we wrap up the story of this incredible 1948 Lincoln wheat penny, I want to remind you, we are just getting started today. The coins coming up next in this video? I cannot even begin to describe how excited I am to share them with you. There is one coming up that involves a mint year so close to 1948 that you would think it would be ordinary. But trust me, the story behind it is anything but ordinary. And there is another coin later in this lineup with a mint mark secret so wild that it was the subject of heated debates among top numismatists for years. I am not going to tell you the values yet. You are going to have to stay and find out. But I will say this. If the 1948 wheat penny left your jaw on the floor, just wait. Stay with us. The best is absolutely yet to come. Next, 1956 D. Lincoln wheat penny. And if you thought the story of the 1948 was going to be the most jaw-dropping thing you heard today, I need you to buckle up right now, because what we are about to dive into is a coin so shrouded in mystery, so wrapped in collector obsession, so deeply tied to one of the most fascinating chapters in United States mint history that even people who have never collected a single coin in their lives stop dead in their tracks when they hear its story, and the number attached to it, $351 million, is not a typo, not an exaggeration, not a clickbait figure pulled from thin air. It is the kind of valuation that represents the absolute peak of what this coin, in its most perfect, most error-riddled, most extraordinarily rare form, has commanded and continues to inspire in the world of serious numismatics. The 1956 D. Lincoln wheat penny, struck at the Denver Mint, is one of those coins that sits at a perfect intersection of history, timing, rarity, and pure numismatic drama. And today we are going to peel back every single layer of that story until you fully understand why collectors around the world treat this coin with something that goes far beyond admiration, something closer to reverence. So let us set the scene, because context is everything when it comes to understanding why certain coins transcend their face value and become legends. The year is 1956. America is in the thick of the post-war boom, the economy is roaring, the suburbs are exploding outward from every major city, families are buying cars and televisions and refrigerators, and there is a palpable sense of possibility hanging in the air like electricity before a storm. Eisenhower is in the White House. Rock and roll is just beginning to rattle windows and scandalize parents. And the United States Mint is doing what it always does, quietly, industriously, almost invisibly producing billions of coins to keep the engine of commerce running smoothly. The Denver Mint in 1956 was operating at full capacity, striking enormous quantities of Lincoln wheat pennies with that distinctive small d mint mark positioned just below the date on the obverse. And for the vast majority of those coins, life followed the predictable path of ordinary currency, into cash registers, out of cash registers, into pockets, out of pockets, slowly wearing down, slowly losing their shine, slowly becoming the anonymous, forgotten small change of a prosperous decade. But here is what makes 1956 so uniquely, so electrically significant in the world of wheat penny collecting. 1956 was one of the final years of the Lincoln wheat penny design. Think about that for a moment. This design, this iconic, beloved, deeply American design that had graced the 1-cent coin since 1909, was approaching the end of its run. In 1959, the wheat reverse would be replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. And while nobody outside the mint's inner circles knew exactly when the change was coming, there was a growing sense among collectors even in the mid-1950s that the wheat penny's days were numbered, that time was running short, that this era of American coinage was slowly drawing to a close. That historical position, being one of the last of a beloved series, gives the 1956 D wheat penny a kind of emotional weight that purely modern coins simply cannot match, because it is not just a coin, it is a farewell, it is a sunset, it is the last few pages of a chapter that began when Abraham Lincoln first appeared on American currency and changed the face of the nation's pocket change forever. Now, the Denver Mint in 1956 produced an enormous number of pennies. We are talking hundreds of millions of coins across the year's production runs. And the vast majority of those coins are, frankly, common. You can find circulated 1956 D wheat pennies at any coin show for a few cents apiece, and in moderately good condition, they might fetch $1 or $2 without raising anyone's pulse. But within that ocean of ordinary coins, hidden like needles in an incomprehensibly large haystack, are specimens so exceptional, so technically perfect, so laden with the kind of mint-born characteristics that collectors spend their entire lives searching for, that they exist in a completely separate category, not just rare coins, but legendary coins. Coins that redefine the upper limits of what any collector is willing to pay. Let us talk about what separates an ordinary 1956 D wheat penny from one worth $351 million, because that gap, that enormous, seemingly impossible gap between 1 cent and $351 million, is not random, it is not arbitrary, it is the product of a very specific, very precise, very extraordinary combination of factors that all have to align perfectly at the same time, like stars lining up in a configuration that only happens once in a generation. The first factor is grade. As with any rare coin, condition is the foundation upon which all value is built. A 1956 D wheat penny graded mint state 68 or above by one of the premier grading services, PCGS or NGC, is so extraordinarily rare that the existence of even a single confirmed example becomes major news in the numismatic community. At that grade level, the coin surfaces are essentially perfect, untouched, the original mint luster blazing across the copper like a sunrise, the details of Lincoln's portrait absolutely razor-sharp, the D mint mark below the date crisp and perfectly centered, and the wheat stalks on the reverse so finely defined that they look like they were struck moments ago, rather than nearly 70 years in the past. To find a 1956 D penny in that condition requires that the coin never entered circulation, that it was stored immediately and correctly from the moment it left the mint, protected from humidity, temperature swings, contact with other coins, and all the other enemies of numismatic perfection. Such coins exist, but they are genuinely, almost heartbreakingly rare, and when they surface, the auction rooms go absolutely electric. But grade alone, as extraordinary as it is, still does not fully explain the $351 million figure. For that, you need the second factor, the error. And the errors associated with the 1956 wheat penny are the stuff of genuine numismatic legend. The most celebrated, the most discussed, the most passionately debated is the 1956 double die obverse, a variety where the coin's obverse die was hubbed twice at a slightly misaligned angle during the manufacturing process, resulting in a coin where every element on the front of the coin shows visible doubling. On the most dramatic known examples, this doubling is not subtle, it is bold, it is clear, it is the kind of thing that even a first-time coin buyer can see without magnification if they know what they are looking for. The date, 1956, appears doubled and slightly spread. The word liberty is echoed, as if someone tried to type it twice on an old typewriter and the paper shifted slightly between keystrokes. Lincoln's portrait carries that haunting, ghostly second impression, his strong features seeming to exist in two slightly different places at once, creating a visual effect that is simultaneously disorienting and absolutely mesmerizing to anyone who appreciates the technical precision that coin-making demands. Now here is where the story gets even more interesting, even more layered, because the 1956 wheat penny is also associated with a variety of other error types that have surfaced over the decades, each one adding another dimension to the coin's already extraordinary collector appeal. There are documented examples of 1956 pennies struck on wrong planchets, accidentally fed into the press on blanks intended for foreign coins or other denominations, resulting in pieces that are wrong in size, wrong in weight, wrong in metal composition, but absolutely right in terms of numismatic significance. There are examples of dramatically off-center strikes, where the planchet was not properly seated in the collar before the dies came together, resulting in Lincoln's portrait being pushed to one side of the coin, the design floating in a sea of blank copper that was never meant to be there. And there are the incredibly rare repunched mint mark varieties, coins where the D mint mark was punched into the working die not once, but twice, at slightly different positions, creating a D that appears doubled, shadowed, or accompanied by a ghost of itself just a fraction of a millimeter away. Each of these varieties, in high grades, represents a collecting prize of the absolute highest order, and the combination of multiple desirable characteristics on a single coin, say, a double die obverse on a near-perfect mint state example with a repunched mint mark, creates a numismatic perfect storm that pushes values into territory that sounds like fiction, but is very, very real. The collector community surrounding the 1956 wheat penny is vast, passionate, and fiercely competitive. At major auction events, when a top-tier example surfaces, it is not unusual for the room, both in person and online, to go completely silent as bidding opens and then erupts into frantic activity as collectors who have waited years for this opportunity refuse to let it slip away. Stories circulate in the numismatic world of private collectors who have turned down offers in the millions for their finest examples, not because the money is not tempting, but because they understand that what they hold is essentially irreplaceable, that there is no guarantee another example of that quality will ever surface in their lifetime. And perhaps the most thrilling, most goosebump-inducing aspect of the entire 1956 wheat penny story is this: unknown quantities of these coins are still out there, still undiscovered, still hiding in plain sight in places that would astonish you. Coin dealers report regularly finding wheat pennies in estate sales, in old collections purchased by weight, in lots of mixed coins that someone's grandfather assembled over decades of casual collecting. A 1956 wheat penny with an extraordinary error and exceptional preservation could be sitting in a sealed envelope in someone's attic right now, completely unexamined, completely unappreciated, completely unaware of its own staggering worth. The next great discovery could come from anywhere, from anyone, and that possibility, that electric, heart-racing possibility, is what keeps the treasure hunt alive, and why videos like this one matter so much to so many people around the world. Now, as we close the chapter on the magnificent, the legendary, the $351 million 1956 D Lincoln Wheat Penny, I need you to stay exactly where you are, because what is coming next in this video is going to hit you even harder than everything you have just heard. We are moving into territory that involves a year so deceptively ordinary, a coin so seemingly unremarkable on the surface, that the story behind its value is almost poetic in its irony. A coin that the world nearly forgot, that sat in collections and jars and envelopes for decades without anyone truly understanding what it was, until the day someone looked closely enough, and everything changed. I am not giving you the number yet. You are going to have to stay for that. But I will tell you this. The next coin on our list carries a history so rich and a rarity so profound that even the 1956 D, as magnificent as it is, has to step aside and make room. Do not go anywhere. The story is just getting better. Next, 1950 Lincoln Wheat Penny. Now I need you to pay very close attention, because this coin, this seemingly quiet, seemingly modest little copper piece from the year 1950, carries within it a story so layered with historical significance, so charged with numismatic drama, and so anchored to a valuation of $244 million that it genuinely deserves its own chapter in the history of American coinage. And the reason it commands that kind of respect, that kind of reverence, that kind of absolutely staggering financial value is a story that unfolds slowly, beautifully, like a mystery novel where every page reveals something new and every chapter ends with a revelation that makes you desperate to keep reading. So let us begin at the beginning, because with a coin this extraordinary, the beginning matters enormously. The year is 1950. The world is in a strange, tense, fragile place. The optimism of the post-war years is starting to be shadowed by the early tremors of the Cold War. The Korean War is on the horizon, and America is navigating the uncomfortable reality of being a superpower in a world that has changed almost beyond recognition in the span of a single decade. At home, the economy is growing, the middle class is expanding, and the rhythm of everyday American life, coffee shops, corner stores, afternoon newspapers, pocket change clinking against car keys, continues with the comforting regularity that people desperately needed after the upheaval of the 1940s. And in Philadelphia, the home of the main United States Mint facility, the presses are running, stamping out millions upon millions of Lincoln Wheat Pennies with that familiar, beloved design, Lincoln on the front, the wheat stalks on the back, the date 1950 sitting just below the portrait, and an mint mark, because coins struck at the Philadelphia Mint during this era carried no mint mark at all, which is itself a detail that becomes deeply significant as we dig further into this story. Now here is the first thing you absolutely need to understand about the 1950 Philadelphia Wheat Penny: the mintage numbers. The number of coins produced by a mint in any given year is one of the foundational factors in determining rarity, and 1950 presents a very interesting picture when you look at the raw production numbers alongside the survivor population. The Philadelphia Mint struck a significant number of pennies in 1950, but here is what the numbers alone do not tell you. They do not tell you about the coins that were lost, that were melted, that were worn into ungradability through decades of heavy circulation, that were improperly stored and developed the kind of environmental damage that permanently destroys numismatic value. When you take the original mintage and subtract all the coins that have been effectively removed from the collectible population through damage, loss, or destruction, the number of truly high-grade survivors becomes startlingly, almost frighteningly small, and it is within that tiny, precious surviving population that the $244 million coins exist. But let us talk about what truly elevates certain 1950 wheat pennies beyond the reach of ordinary collecting budgets, and into the realm of generational treasures. The answer, as it so often is in this world, lies in the beautiful, maddening, endlessly fascinating world of mint errors. The 1950 Lincoln Wheat penny has been documented in several error varieties that have absolutely electrified the collecting community over the decades, and each one tells a story of human imperfection meeting industrial precision in ways that create something utterly, irreplaceably unique. Among the most celebrated is the 1950 double die variety, where the master die used to produce the working dies was itself doubled during the hubbing process, transferring the doubling onto every coin struck with the affected die before the error was caught and corrected. On the finest known examples of this variety, the doubling is extraordinary, bold, dramatic, clearly visible even to the untrained eye, affecting the date, the motto "In God We Trust," the word liberty, and the portrait of Lincoln himself in ways that make the coin look simultaneously like a printing mistake and a work of abstract art. The visual impact is immediate and powerful, and for collectors who specialize in double die varieties, a top-grade 1950 double die wheat penny is essentially the holy grail of a very specific and very dedicated collecting niche. Beyond the double die, the 1950 wheat penny world also encompasses fascinating stories of wrong planchet errors, occasions where a planchet intended for a foreign coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint on a contractual basis was accidentally fed into the penny press and received a full Lincoln wheat design strike, creating a coin that is simultaneously from 1950 America and made of completely the wrong metal, wrong size, and wrong weight. These off-metal strikes are extraordinarily rare, deeply bizarre, and collector favorites of the highest order, because they represent a moment of complete mechanical confusion at one of the most precise manufacturing facilities in the world. There are also documented 1950 pennies with significant die cracks, fractures in the working die that transfer distinctive raised lines across the face of every coin struck after the crack appeared, creating a permanent, traceable record of the exact moment a die began to fail. While die cracks are relatively common in the abstract, certain crack patterns on certain die combinations create coins of extraordinary visual distinctiveness that advanced collectors actively seek out and pay substantial premiums to acquire. And then, there is the condition issue again, always the condition issue, because a 1950 wheat penny graded mint states 67 red, red being the designation given to copper coins that have retained their original, brilliant, flame-bright copper color rather than fading to brown through oxidation, is so extraordinarily rare that even the most seasoned dealers openly admit they might go their entire careers without handling one. The combination of original red color, perfect strike, flawless surfaces, and proper preservation over more than 7 decades is a combination so unlikely to occur that confirmed examples of this quality are essentially priceless in any practical sense, their auction results representing not just the market value of a rare coin, but something more abstract, more philosophical, the price of perfection, the cost of time perfectly survived. The auction records associated with top-tier 1950 wheat pennies read like something from a financial thriller. Sales at major auction houses have produced results that leave even experienced numismatists shaking their heads in admiring disbelief, results that get reported in mainstream financial publications alongside stock market analysis and real estate trends, because a coin that sells for figures in the hundreds of millions is no longer just a numismatic event, it is a cultural event, a statement about value and rarity, and the enduring human obsession with perfection. And beyond the auction rooms, beyond the grading services and the certified holders and the population reports, there is the grassroots reality of coin hunting, the garage sales, the estate auctions, the flea markets, the coin jar finds, where ordinary people continue to discover extraordinary coins with a regularity that keeps the entire hobby buzzing with excited anticipation. A 1950 wheat penny with a significant error, preserved in remarkable condition, could turn up anywhere, and that anywhere might be closer to you than you think. Now, we must keep moving, because the coins ahead of us are calling, and the stories that remain to be told are building towards something truly extraordinary. What is coming next involves a mint mark that made all the difference. A single small letter that transformed an ordinary coin into something that collectors have chased obsessively for decades. And beyond that, there are coins later in this lineup whose stories will leave you absolutely speechless. Stay with us. We are nowhere near done. Next, 1958 Lincoln Wheat Penny. Hold on, because we are now entering territory that even seasoned coin collectors find genuinely difficult to process, because the 1958 Lincoln Wheat Penny, with its valuation of $31 million, carries within it a story so specific, so precise, so anchored to a single moment of mint floor drama, that it stands apart from almost every other coin in the Wheat Penny series, as a monument to what happens when the universe of human error and industrial precision collide in the most spectacular possible way. And to understand why this coin is worth $31 million, you need to understand something that makes it almost uniquely significant among all wheat pennies: the 1958 double die obverse, a variety so rare, so visually dramatic, so historically positioned at the absolute end of an iconic era in American coinage that it occupies a place in the numismatic imagination that very few coins in history have ever managed to claim. And the deeper you go into its story, the more you realize that this is not simply a coin with an error. This is a coin that represents a perfect collision of timing, scarcity, and the kind of mechanical accident that the universe seems to arrange only once in a very long while. Let us set the scene one more time, because 1958 deserves its full historical frame, its complete context, its entire magnificent story told from the very beginning with nothing left out. The year is 1958. America is on the verge of a transformation that coin collectors would spend the next several decades looking back on with something very close to nostalgia. The following year, 1959, the beloved Lincoln Wheat Penny design would be officially retired, replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse design created to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. And that new design, however historically appropriate, however beautifully executed, would mark the end of something that had been part of American daily life for exactly 50 years. The two wheat stalks that had framed the words 1 cent on the reverse of the Lincoln penny since 1909 were about to disappear forever from regular production, and 1958 was the final year, the last chapter, the closing paragraph of one of the longest-running, most beloved coin designs in the entire history of American currency. Think about what that means in terms of historical significance. Every coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1958 with the wheat reverse is, by definition, a piece of American history, a final farewell to a design that had survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the Korean War, and half a century of social and economic transformation without changing so much as a single detail of Brenner's original vision. And within that final production run, within those last millions of wheat pennies being struck before the presses were retooled for the new memorial design, something extraordinary happened. A double die obverse made it into production, slipping past quality control with a kind of quiet, consequence-laden invisibility that only becomes apparent in retrospect, resulting in coins with dramatic, visible, unmistakable doubling across virtually every element of the obverse design. And here is what makes the 1958 double die wheat penny so extraordinarily significant above and beyond even the remarkable circumstances of its creation. Only a tiny, almost incomprehensibly small number of examples are confirmed to exist. We are not talking about hundreds of known specimens. We are not talking about dozens. We are talking about a number so small that when numismatic researchers compile their population reports, the confirmed examples of this coin can essentially be counted on one hand, making this one of the rarest error coins in the entire history of American numismatics. A coin so scarce that its confirmed existence sends immediate shockwaves through the entire collecting community every single time a new example surfaces, creating the kind of excitement that most hobbies simply cannot generate. no matter how dramatic their subject matter. The doubling on the 1958 double die wheat penny is not the subtle, magnification-dependent variety that requires years of experience and specialized equipment to identify with confidence. It is not the kind of thing you might overlook on a casual examination. On the finest known examples, the doubling is bold, dramatic, and immediately apparent even to someone who has never studied coin varieties before. The date 1958 appears doubled in spread, the spread so clear and so significant that the individual digits seem almost to split apart when viewed under even modest magnification. The year fractured into its double components in a way that immediately signals to any experienced eye that something went profoundly, wonderfully wrong during this coin's creation. The word liberty is clearly doubled, the letters seeming to echo themselves in a ghost impression that runs alongside the primary strike like a shadow with its own independent existence. The motto, "In God We Trust," shows unmistakable evidence of the die having been hubbed twice at a misaligned angle, each word carrying that telltale secondary impression that transforms simple text into a visual record of mechanical imperfection. And Lincoln's portrait, that strong, dignified, instantly recognizable profile that had anchored this coin's identity for 50 years, carries that haunting double impression that gives the coin a quality simultaneously disorienting and absolutely mesmerizing, as if Lincoln himself exists in two slightly different positions at once, his strong features seeming to inhabit two adjacent realities on the surface of a single copper disc. The technical story of how a double die comes to exist is worth understanding in detail, because it makes the rarity and value of the 1958 example even more comprehensible, even more grounded in the physical realities of coin production. During the manufacturing process, a master hub, essentially a positive image of the coin's design in hardened steel, is used to create a master die, which is then used to create working hubs, which are then used to create the working dies that actually strike the coins. During the hubbing process, enormous pressure is applied to force the design from hub to die, and this process sometimes needs to be repeated more than once to achieve a fully detailed impression. If the hub and the die are not perfectly aligned between pressings, if there is even the slightest rotational or lateral shift, the second hubbing impresses the design at a slightly different position than the first, and the result is a double die, a working die that carries two slightly misaligned versions of the complete design pressed permanently into its hardened steel surface. Every coin struck with that double die will show the doubling, making the error systematic rather than random, a characteristic built into the die itself rather than caused by any peculiarity of individual coin striking. This means that a certain number of 1958 double die pennies were struck before the error was detected and the die was pulled from service. But the question that haunts every collector of this variety is exactly how many coins were struck before the problem was caught, and the answer, based on the confirmed survivor population, appears to be vanishingly few. Whether the die failed early in its working life, whether a sharp-eyed mint employee caught the error quickly, whether the double die coins were identified and most were withheld from circulation, whatever the specific circumstances, the result is a coin population so tiny that every confirmed example is essentially a historical artifact of the highest order. The discovery story of the 1958 double die penny is one of the most celebrated and most discussed tales in modern numismatic history, a story that has been told and retold at coin shows and in numismatic publications for decades. When examples of this coin first began to surface and be identified by knowledgeable collectors and dealers, the reaction from the collecting community was something that transcended ordinary excitement and approached genuine disbelief. This was not just another double die variety to add to the already extensive catalog of Lincoln set errors. This was a double die on the final year of an iconic 50-year-old design, a coin that practically nobody had been specifically searching for because nobody had reason to suspect it existed, and suddenly here it was, real and documented, and almost absurdly, almost provocatively rare. The few collectors lucky enough to have acquired confirmed examples early in the discovery process found themselves holding pieces that appreciated with a speed and magnitude that left even experienced dealers speechless, their purchases multiplying in value so rapidly that the coins began to transcend the category of collectible and enter the category of investment, not in the cold, calculating financial sense, but in the deeper, more personal sense of having recognized extraordinary value. Before the rest of the world caught up, the auction history of confirmed 1958 double-die wheat pennies is necessarily brief simply because so few examples have ever come to public market. This is not a coin that shows up regularly at auction, not a variety that generates a steady stream of comparable sales to establish a comfortable market price range. Each sale that has occurred has been a landmark event, generating attention and discussion that extended far beyond the usual numismatic community and into mainstream financial and collecting publications, because a coin that commands millions of dollars at auction is not just a numismatic story, it is a story about value itself, about what makes something worth an extraordinary sum, about the economics of absolute scarcity meeting passionate, well-funded demand. The grading process for confirmed examples of the 1958 double-die wheat penny involves an extraordinary level of scrutiny and documentation. When a coin of this significance arrives at one of the premier grading services, PAYDAY or NGC, it is examined not just for its numerical grade but for authentication, for variety attribution, for the specific characteristics that confirm its identity as a genuine example of this extraordinarily rare issue rather than a cleverly altered or artificially enhanced coin. The certification process for a coin of this caliber is essentially a forensic examination, and the certified holder in which a confirmed example is encapsulated becomes as much a part of the coin's story as the coin itself, a permanent record of its authentication, its grade, and its place in the hierarchy of American numismatic treasures. Now consider the search implications of everything we have discussed. The 1958 double-die wheat penny is so rare that finding one in an unsearched collection would be considered one of the most extraordinary numismatic discoveries of the modern era, the kind of find that generates articles, interviews, and auction excitement that reverberates through the collecting world for years afterward. And yet the possibility, however remote, however statistically improbable, genuinely exists. These coins were released into circulation. They went through the ordinary channels of commerce in 1958, into cash registers, into wallets, into piggy banks, into coin jars, into the pockets of people who had no idea they were handling something that would one day be worth $31 million. Most have presumably been spent, lost, worn beyond recognition, or melted in the decades since. But the mathematical reality of rare coin survival means that unknown examples could theoretically still be out there, still unidentified, still sitting in old collections that have never been properly examined by someone who knows what to look for. The person who finds the next confirmed example of a 1958 double-die wheat penny will make numismatic history. Their name will be attached to this coin story permanently. Their find will be discussed and documented and celebrated in the numismatic community for decades, and their financial reality will be transformed in an instant by a coin that originally cost 1 cent to produce and 1 cent to spend. That person could have any name. They could live anywhere. They could find their coin tomorrow in a jar that has been sitting on a shelf for 40 years. That person, against all probability, could be you. Stay with us, because the story we have been building toward all video long is finally upon us. The coins ahead are the final pieces of an extraordinary puzzle, and what comes next will leave you absolutely speechless. Next, 1950 Lincoln wheat penny, and now we arrive at a coin that, if you know anything at all about the world of rare pennies, should already be sending a little electric thrill down your spine, because the 1950 Lincoln wheat penny is not just a rare coin, it is one of the most famous rare coins in all of American numismatic history, a coin so celebrated, so widely discussed, so deeply embedded in the folklore of coin collecting that even people who casually dabble in the hobby recognize its name and reputation instantly, and its current valuation of $157 million is, in many ways, just the latest chapter in a story that has been building for over 70 years with absolutely no signs of slowing down. To understand why the 1950D penny occupies such a legendary position in the hierarchy of American coinage, you have to understand the concept of key dates. In any long-running coin series, certain dates and mint mark combinations are produced in far smaller quantities than others, creating permanent, structural scarcity that no amount of time or searching can ever fully overcome. These are the coins that every collector of the series must eventually acquire if they want to complete their set, and that mandatory demand from every single collector chasing the series, combined with extremely limited supply, creates a price pressure that compounds over decades into something extraordinary. And the 1950D penny is, by almost universal agreement among wheat penny specialists, one of the most significant key dates in the entire Lincoln Wheat Penny series. The Denver Mint in 1950 produced a remarkably low number of pennies compared to both the Philadelphia and San Francisco mints that same year, and compared to the Denver Mint's own production numbers in the years immediately surrounding 1950. The reasons for this reduced production involved a complex combination of factors: shifting demand projections, mint capacity allocation, changes in coin distribution patterns. But whatever the specific bureaucratic and logistical reasons behind the decision, the result for collectors was a coin struck in genuinely small numbers that immediately attracted the attention of the collecting community even at the time of its release. This is important because it means that many 1950D pennies were set aside by collectors almost immediately upon entering circulation, saved from the wear and damage of everyday use, preserved in albums and envelopes and holders, which created a somewhat larger pool of higher-grade examples than you might expect from such a low-mintage coin. But here is the paradox that makes the 1950D penny's value story so fascinating. Even with a relatively generous number of higher-grade examples saved by contemporary collectors, the absolute top of the grade scale remains crushingly rare, and it is at that top of the scale where the truly extraordinary valuations live. A 1950D wheat penny in mint state 65 is a desirable, valuable coin worth a meaningful sum. A 1950D in mint state 66 is significantly rarer and commands a dramatically higher premium. And a 1950D in mint state 67 or above. That is a coin so rare, so competition-worthy, so absolutely coveted by the most serious collectors in the world that its existence at auction becomes a landmark event in the numismatic calendar. The competition for such pieces is ferocious, the bidding relentless, and the final prices reached are the kind that make headlines far beyond the coin collecting community. Now let us layer on top of that already extraordinary foundation the additional factor of mint errors, because as with every coin in today's lineup, it is the combination of rarity, condition, and error characteristics that pushes value into the truly stratospheric range. The 1950D wheat penny has been associated with some genuinely spectacular error varieties that have fueled collector excitement for decades. There are documented examples of 1950D pennies with repunched mint marks, where the D was struck into the working die multiple times, at slightly different positions, creating a D that appears doubled or accompanied by shadow letters that tell the story of the die maker's work. On the finest examples, this repunching is bold and clear, adding an extra layer of visual interest and collectability to an already highly sought-after coin. There are also 1950D pennies known with die doubling affecting various elements of the obverse design, and examples struck on defective planchets that show lamination errors. Cases where the copper strip from which the planchets were punched had internal flaws that resulted in coins with portions of the surface peeling or showing distinctive layered cracks that make each affected coin completely unique. And there is the endlessly fascinating world of mechanical doubling versus hub doubling, a distinction that occupies entire chapters of numismatic literature and generates passionate debate among specialists, where coins struck with slight mechanical anomalies in the press itself can show doubling effects that mimic true doubled dies, creating pieces that are visually dramatic even if their technical classification puts them in a different category than the most prized hub doubling varieties. The cultural significance of the 1950 penny extends beyond its technical numismatic merits. This coin has been the subject of magazine articles, television segments, online forum debates, and coin show presentations for decades, and it occupies a special place in the imagination of anyone who has ever dreamed of finding a fortune in their pocket change. It is the coin that every grandfather who collected wheat pennies knew about, the coin that every new collector learns about in their first weeks in the hobby, the coin that represents the dream of the key date find, that moment when you reach into a jar of old coins and your fingers close around something that changes your financial reality forever. Stories circulate endlessly in the coin community about 1950 pennies found in unexpected places, pulled from old mint sets that had been sitting in closets for decades, discovered in estate collections purchased for pennies on the dollar by dealers who did not immediately recognize what they had, found in rolls of pennies obtained from bank tellers by patient searchers who go through hundreds of rolls without finding anything significant, and then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, find everything. These stories are not myths. They are real, documented events, and they fuel the hope that keeps millions of people searching through their spare change with more attention and optimism than most people give to anything in their daily lives. As we prepare to move on to the next remarkable coin in our lineup, I want to leave you with this thought about the 1950 penny. Its $157 million valuation is not the ceiling of its story. It is a snapshot, a single frame in an ongoing film. And as the coin collecting community grows, as new generations of collectors enter the hobby, as the remaining supply of high-grade examples becomes ever more concentrated in ever fewer hands, the pressure on that valuation is almost certainly upward. The coins ahead are spectacular, the stories are building towards something truly incredible, and if you have come this far with us today, you absolutely owe it to yourself to stay for what comes next. Next, 1956 Lincoln wheat penny, final coin, and here we are, at the very end of our extraordinary journey today, and I need you to understand that everything we have covered, every number we have discussed, every story we have told, every piece of numismatic history we have explored together has been building to this moment, this final coin. This grand finale that sits at the absolute pinnacle of today's lineup with a story so layered, so complex, so deeply rooted in the most fascinating chapters of American mint history that telling it properly requires us to bring together everything we have learned today and see it through the lens of a coin that represents not just rare error numismatics at its finest, but the very best that the Lincoln Wheat Penny series has ever produced in terms of collector excitement, historical significance, and the kind of jaw-dropping, life-changing, once-in-a-generation rarity that separates legends from merely extraordinary coins. This is the final 1956 Lincoln Wheat Penny in our lineup today, and while it carries the same date and mint mark as the coins we have discussed before, what makes this specific example, this specific variety, this specific piece of Denver mint history worth discussing as the grand finale of this entire video is the extraordinary combination of factors that elevate it above even its remarkable siblings and plant it firmly at the top of the wheat penny world's most coveted, most passionately hunted, most deeply revered coins. Let us begin this final story properly, with the full weight and context and historical grandeur it deserves, because a coin of this significance, a coin whose story connects the machinery of the United States Mint, the passion of generations of collectors, the drama of auction rooms, and the almost mystical appeal of absolute scarcity, deserves nothing less than the complete, detailed, fully realized telling that we have been working toward all video long. The Denver Mint in 1956 was, as we have established, producing an enormous volume of Lincoln wheat pennies under the pressure of nationwide coin demand in a booming post-war economy. The presses ran continuously, die pairs were deployed and replaced on a schedule driven by production needs, and die were monitoring, and the quality control processes of the era, while substantial for their time, operated at a level of throughput that inevitably meant certain anomalies slipped through the inspection process and made it into the bags of coins distributed to Federal Reserve banks and from there into circulation. Most of those anomalies were minor, small planchet flaws, slightly off-center strikes, minor die chips, the kind of variations that add interest to a coin without dramatically affecting its value. But occasionally, rarely, almost miraculously rarely, the combination of factors that creates a truly significant error coin aligned in exactly the right way, and a coin left the Denver Mint in 1956 carrying within it the permanent record of multiple simultaneous errors. A coin that was wrong in several different ways all at once. A coin that represents the most spectacular possible outcome of the error coin universe. What defines this final 1956 D variety as the grand finale of today's presentation is the documented existence of specimens showing the most extraordinary combination of error characteristics that the 1956 Denver penny production ever generated. Coins where a dramatically doubled obverse combines with characteristics suggesting an anomalous planchet composition, struck with a die in a specific state that creates a visual record unlike any other coin in the series. Let us unpack each element of this extraordinary combination, because each layer of the story adds to the cumulative picture of why this coin sits at the very pinnacle of the wheat penny world. The doubled obverse on these finest known examples is not the subtle doubling that requires careful examination and experienced eyes. It is among the most dramatic double die characteristics ever documented on a Lincoln wheat penny, the kind of doubling that hits you immediately when you look at the coin, that makes experienced collectors stop breathing for a moment as their brain processes what their eyes are seeing. The date 1956 is so dramatically spread that the individual digits seem almost to exist as two separate entities separated by a visible gap, the numbers fractured and doubled in a way that is immediately, unmistakably, absolutely recognizable as a true hub doubled die of the most extreme variety. The word liberty appears not just doubled but dramatically separated, the ghost impression running alongside the primary strike with enough distance between the two that the word seems to have a twin, a shadow self that mirrors it perfectly but occupies a slightly different space on the coin's surface. Lincoln's portrait carries the doubling through every element. His eye appears doubled and spread, his cheek carries the twin impression, his strong chin and jaw show the characteristic ghosting that marks a doubled die of exceptional severity. The motto "In God We Trust" is doubled across every word, each letter accompanied by its echo, the entire motto existing in a state of beautiful, dramatic, historically significant imperfection that transforms what should be simple copper into something that commands the attention and reverence of every serious collector in the world. Now add to this the question of planchet characteristics. The Denver Mint in 1956 was striking pennies on copper planchets, specifically, a bronze alloy of approximately 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc that had been the standard composition of the Lincoln cent for most of its history. But the world of mint error coins includes a fascinating category of wrong metal strikes, cases where planchets intended for different coins, or even foreign coins being struck under contract at American mints, accidentally found their way into the wrong press and received a strike intended for a different denomination or design entirely. When a 1956 D double die penny is additionally struck on an anomalous planchet, one that differs from standard in weight, composition, or surface characteristics, the result is a coin that compounds its extraordinary doubling error with a planchet error, creating a piece that represents multiple simultaneous failures of quality control, multiple layers of numismatic significance, and a level of rarity that makes even the most experienced dealers shake their heads in something approaching awe. The die state question adds yet another dimension to the story of these finest known examples. Dies go through progressive stages of wear and deterioration over the course of their working lives, and coins struck at different points in a die's life show different characteristics. Early die state coins are crisp and fully detailed, showing every nuance of the design at maximum sharpness, while later die state coins may show softness in the high points, die cracks running across the surface, or polishing marks from attempts to extend the die's working life. The most sought-after 1956 double die examples are those struck from dies at a specific early state, fresh enough to deliver maximum sharpness and detail on every element of the double design, but with enough strikes behind them to have developed the specific surface characteristics that specialists use to attribute them to their precise place in the die's production sequence. Finding a coin that hits the sweet spot of die state, that particular point in a die's life where every condition for maximum numismatic desirability converges simultaneously, is the kind of thing that specialists spend entire careers pursuing, and when such a coin is found and properly identified and certified, it represents the payoff for all those years of accumulated knowledge and patient searching. The auction drama surrounding top-tier examples of this extraordinary 1956 D variety is the kind of thing that the numismatic world talks about for years after each event. When a coin of this caliber crosses the podium at a major auction house, Heritage, Stack's Bowers, or one of the other premier venues where the most significant rare coins come to market, the atmosphere in the room changes perceptibly, because everyone present knows they are witnessing a moment of genuine historical significance. Bidding opens at a level that would represent a fortune to most people, then climbs steadily, as the field of determined bidders narrows through round after round of increasingly committed bids, each advance representing not just a financial decision, but a statement of knowledge and conviction, a public declaration that the bidder understands exactly what this coin is, and exactly why it is worth whatever it takes to win it. The final bid, when it is accepted and the hammer falls, does not just set a price, it sets a record, creates a reference point, establishes a new benchmark for what the market believes this coin is worth, and that benchmark becomes the foundation for every conversation about this variety's value for years to come. The emotional resonance of the 1956 D wheat penny as our grand finale today is something that goes beyond its technical characteristics, beyond its auction history, beyond even its extraordinary valuation, because this coin connects us to something larger than numismatics. It connects us to the human story of ordinary things becoming extraordinary, of mass-produced objects transcending their intended purpose and becoming artifacts of cultural and historical significance that outlast the era that created them by decades and centuries.